There's one thing I did say to Beth is I'm not a sore loser, and I'll do it, but I'm an obnoxious winner. So when I do win, you hear about it. It's a new year, right? So who's still saying Happy New Year? Okay, stop. I stopped saying Happy New Year. It's February. We're in the year now. And so I'll say it one more time. Happy New Year. It's kind of, right? But who's staying on Proverbs? Who's still reading Proverbs? Good. Great. Right? Today's February 2nd. And look, we're going to have a church full of just wise people. Wisdom is going to be overflowing at Landmark. So today's February 2nd. You should be in Proverbs chapter 2. And every day, look, I've been doing this for 47 years. And every day, something pops out at me in Proverbs. And this morning, it's Proverbs 2, verses 2 through 4, where Solomon says, incline your ear to wisdom. Apply your heart to understanding. If you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as hidden treasures. Solomon's telling his son, pursue wisdom. Go after it. That's the thing you should go after. Incline your ear to it, he says. Apply your heart to it. Cry out for wisdom. Lift up your voice to God and say, give me wisdom. He's saying, chase after wisdom and understanding with the same desperation that you would chase money and wealth, that you would chase success and achievement, that you would chase happiness and pleasure, power and influence, as you would chase knowledge and intellectual growth. What are you chasing? What are you chasing in your life? What is most valuable to you? Right? Recently, someone asked me, I sat down with a man, and he said, I just want to meet you, I want to ask you some questions. He's asked me about books that I've read, and he's asked me about experiences that I've had and where I grew up. And he said, I just have one more question for you. What's your most valuable possession? I had to think about that for a minute. And I said, you know what? My testimony, my name, because a whole lot has gone into bringing me to this point in my life. Not all good, not all fun. You all should have come for the ride. Some of it was fun, some of it was distressing, but it was all transforming. You know, Paul says all things work together for the good. You don't always feel that way, do you? You're like, I don't see how this works out for the good. Not all things are good, but all things work together for the good. And the fact of the matter is, really the main thing of my testimony is I'm not a finished product. And that God's still working on me, right? I recently had a health scare. It's like death is running around trying to grab me, and I just, whoa, it just keeps missing me. But I value every single day. So we're in Proverbs 9, and it's the 7 pillars of wisdom we're going to talk about. I have been waiting for years to talk about this. I've been reading about this. I've been researching this. What do people say? What are these 7 pillars that Solomon's talking about? In Proverbs chapter 9, verses 1 through 6, it says, wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her meat. She has mixed her wine. She has also finished her table. She has sent out her maidens, and she cries out from the highest places of the city, whoever is simple, let him turn and hear. As for him who lacks understanding, she says, come, eat of my bread, and drink of the wine I have mixed. Forsake foolishness and live, and go in the way of understanding. What are these 7 pillars that Solomon's talking about? Are they just figurative? Or is there a lesson in there? So last year, what was the word of the year? Diligence. The word of this year is pillars, right? Focus on the pillars that support your life. A pillar acts as a structural support. It provides strength and stability to a building or a structure or a life. What are the pillars in your life? In this case, the pillars of wisdom, they help support the life that stands firm in a world of just foolishness, storms, and turmoil. The pillars bear the weight of the life for us and help us stand strong. And the fact that there are 7 pillars, it indicates that wisdom resting on these pillars is, number one, complete and perfect. They make up God's perfect wisdom. Your pillars suggest an enduring strength and stability, don't they? I mean, banks used to build with pillars. So you say, oh, that's strengthly. That's firm. The Parthenon. Anybody ever been to the Parthenon? That thing's still standing. The pillars are still standing. It's gone through earthquakes, storms, wars. 2,500 years, it's still standing. So the 7 pillars of wisdom that Solomon's talk about are solidly founded in the fear of God. That's the beginning of it all. The fear of God provides clarity and vision and purpose for us. We don't need to guess. What does God want me to do? Now, that may not always be what I want to do. But all decisions should stem from this holy vision and purpose. There's no confusion in the fear of God. It's like the difference between values and principles, right? A value is something, it's objective. It's subjective. I mean, it's different for every single person. But a principle stands. I really don't agree with gravity. All right. I'm not getting on a call with you. It's a principle, it's not a value. It leads to wisdom and guidance, and there's a difference between a compass and a map, right? Maps change over time. If you were to look at a map of Ocean City in 1950, it'd be different than the map today. But if you had a compass in 1950, it's the same thing. And my father was funny in giving directions. Because you'd say, Dad, how do I get to this place? You go to Jerusalem Avenue, and you go north. Is that left or right, Dad? I don't. What is that? And don't you know the difference between north and south? I do, but I don't know how Jerusalem Avenue runs. You should have a compass in your car. This is back in the 70s. I'm like, what am I, Sinbad the Sailor? I don't know how to read a compass. Every car has a compass now. My father's insanity is looking smarter and smarter as time goes on. We follow true north principles. Maps change from time to time. I found this definition about the fear of God. The fear of God, the awe of God, refers to a profound sense of wonder, reverence, and admiration for who God is, His works, and His presence. See, number one, God's presence is holy, and we are to be in awe in His presence. I had a friend who was a Catholic bishop, Bishop Paul Dudley from Minnesota, great guy. Older man. We went for a walk one day, and we were just talking about some things, the difference between evangelicalism and Catholicism. And I grew up as a Catholic, and I said to him, man, I do love the Catholic tradition of respecting God. And he said, Terence, it's not respect. I respect you. You're not God. It's reverence. It's awe. It's adoration. I'm blown away when I'm in the presence of God. In Leviticus chapter 10, Moses says to Aaron, hey, this is what God told me. By those who come near me, I must be regarded as holy, and before all the people, I must be glorified. God's not one of our bros. He's Almighty God. John Bevere, in his book, The Awe of God, he says, do you think the King of the universe is going to manifest His presence or speak in a place where He's not honored and revered? Do we come here in holy fear? His name is holy, and we are in awe of it. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 7, it says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes His name in vain. Charles Spurgeon wrote, his whole character commands our reverence because it's superlatively holy, and his name to us is a word of awe. Never to be mentioned flippantly, and never to be quoted without earnest thought and prostration of heart before him. Wow, that's a high calling, isn't it? I had a friend in California, Wayne. I was leaving him one day, and I was like, hey, Wayne, I'll see you later, man. And he goes, hey, man, God bless you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, God bless you. I said, what does that mean? He said, I don't know. And I said, I know, man, because you know what? We say it. You might as well say, go drop dead. I mean, because you say, if you don't, you're using God's name, and as a baptized, spirit-filled Christian, you know what that means? That means God bless you. I put God's name on you. There's power in that. We have to realize the power that we bring to a situation. What does it mean? Where's the power? You don't understand what you bring. When you say God bless you to someone, you're blessing them. I had the opportunity the other day to go to pray with somebody who's dying in the hospital. And I told her I'm going to bless her, and I'm going to put God's name on her, so that when she sees him, he'll recognize her. His praise is holy, and we approach it with awe. Psalm 22:3, it says, but thou art holy, O thou that inhabits the praises of Israel. I was reading in a book about this psalm, and the guy was saying, actually what he's saying there is that God is enthroned on the praises of his people. Yes, he is. He inhabits our praises. He's present when we sing his praise. R.C. Sproul once wrote that, I saw a video of R.C. Sproul. He said, when I'm singing God's praise, I must be focused on him and his glory. I can't be mouthing the words that are not heartfelt, right? I know Billy Joel songs. I could sing them all day long. They're not heartfelt. I just know them. I can't be mouthing the words unless they're heartfelt, because then I'm lying. It's not about whether I like the song. It's not about whether it entertains me. It's about pleasing him. And so I don't show up late or distracted. I am distracted sometimes. I enter the throne room of God. Sometimes I'm distracted. I'm thinking, who are the Giants playing today? You know, just stuff I shouldn't be thinking about. And I'm in the presence of God. I'm not going to be thinking about that when I'm in heaven. So I don't show up late or distracted. I try to ready my heart. What does that mean to us? Readying our hearts to come to the throne room of God and praise him. And I ask God to forgive me for the times that I've entered in an atmosphere of worship with a casual, irreverent, or distracted attitude. His praise is holy, and we are in awe of it. And lastly, his law is holy, and we obey it with awe. You know, there was a time when sin was so attractive to me. Jesus kind of ruined it for me when I got saved. It was no longer fun. Because I knew I was doing the wrong thing. I knew I was disobeying. I knew I was stepping out of God's will. But the fear of God is the basis for everything. It's a principle. Don't be casual about it when we obey God. You all know the story of Uzzah in 2 Samuel, right? David is having the Ark of the Covenant brought back to Jerusalem. And first of all, they're bringing it in a cart. They're not supposed to be bringing it in a cart, but it's a new cart, right? They got a new cart. And they're bringing it up the hill, and it begins to shake. And Uzzah reaches out to steady it, and he's struck dead. Because he was disobedient to what God said, how the Ark of the Covenant should be carried. I went to my pastor when I first read that this many years ago, and I said, hey, man, what's up with God? I mean, come on. Uzzah's only trying to steady things. And my pastor said, hey, look, listen, something you should never forget. God's serious about being holy. He's serious about obeying him. We should obey him with no reservations. And so that's the foundation, the fear of God, the awe of God. And the 7 pillars are built. They rest on that foundation. And I know for years I've been reading books about what are these 7 pillars? What do people say are these 7 pillars? I've gotten so many different ways of looking at it. But really the best illustration is in James. James chapter 3, 13 through 18. James says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil are there." But then he says, "But the wisdom that is from above is first of all pure, founded in the awe of God, purely. Then peace-loving, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and sincere. The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." James gives us the view of pure wisdom, that those 7 pillars are, number one, someone who's peace-loving, someone who's gentle, they're a spirit of submissiveness, they're willing to yield, they're merciful, fruitful, impartial, and sincere. Those are the 7 pillars. And the promise that Solomon shares, that if we rest our lives in these 7 pillars and support our lives, we will attain wisdom and discipline. We will understand words of insight. We'll acquire a disciplined and prudent life. We'll give prudence to the simple, and we will give knowledge and discretion to the young. That's a great promise. So the first pillar is being peace-loving. Romans 8:6, it says, "For the mind set on the flesh is death, but the mind set on the spirit is life and peace." Paul also explains a peace that passes all understanding. That in the midst of stressful, sinful world, we have peace. Everything going on around us that passes all understanding because the mind is set on the Spirit. Wisdom not only preserves our soul in peace, but it brings peace to the situation. And there are 3 things that, if controlled, will preserve our peace. Number one, our desires. James says we desires battle within us that shakes our sense of peace. We're discontent because we're believing a lie. Because the world says everything out there will make you happy. And Jesus says nothing out there will ever make you happy. John Piper, in his book, Desiring God, he says, "There's nothing in the world that can satisfy our deepest longings. And nothing will last long enough for us to remain satisfied. Everything will end up in a junkyard or an ash heap eventually." And he writes in his book, Desiring God, "The deepest longing of the human heart is to know and enjoy the glory of God." Most people don't know that, but that's the truth. And we try to get everything else to fill that void. And Solomon says, in that is the road to peace. Paul says in Philippians, "I've learned the secret to be content in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in need. I am content." You know, I had a friend, again, another guy in California. He said, hey, Terence, I've had nothing and I've had a lot. Now, having a lot's a lot better than having nothing. But he said, but whether I had a lot or I had nothing, I was taught to be content. That's our desires, our reactions. That's how we handle stress and conflict, right? It'll determine our peace and the peace of those around us. Reckless words, Proverbs 12:18 says, "Reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." He urges us to practice this self-control in our reactions because our words spoken without consideration, care, or forethought can bring damaging hurt. We must be mindful of the impact of our reactions. And listen, I am so guilty of this. I really am. Even this week, I reacted as a baby. In this one voice, we talk about no longer being imprisoned by childhood reactions to adult situations. But yes, sometimes I turn that way. It never brings peace to me or anybody else. As Solomon says, we got to control our reactions. He says in Proverbs 23, it is to a man's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. The pillar of peace keeps us from reacting in hurtful and harmful ways, even in controversy. Let our reactions bring healing, not more hurt. And then there's our tongues. You know, our tongues. When there are many words, Solomon says in Proverbs 10:19, when there are many words, wrongdoing is unavoidable. But one who restrains his lips is wise. In essence, he's saying, shut up, right? But watch what you say. It's a great German phrase. I want you to repeat after me. You know what? You're going to learn something very, very valuable for the rest of your life this morning. It's a German phrase, halt die Klappe. Anybody know that? It means keep your flap shut. It's kind of a rough way of saying be quiet, but come on, halt die Klappe. Love it. It's great stuff. My old German teacher would be so proud of me teaching German. We have an old saying in sales. If anybody here has worked in sales, once you get to a point where a decision has to be made, the next one who talks loses. How often have we brought division and anger with our words? It's like a spark that ignites an uncontrollable fire, rage out of control. Do you know that those fires in California were started by a spark, by neglected power lines? Are you kidding me? Billions of dollars of loss because of a spark. Solomon says in Proverbs 25:11, like apples of gold and settings of silver is a word spoken at a proper time. Do your words bring division or do they bring healing? You see, this pillar of peace is founded in the fear of God. Would God want me to say this? Often, I'll say, does God want me to say this? No, but I'm going to say it anyway. If it's founded in the fear of God, it'll temper our desires, it'll control our reactions, and it'll guide our tongues. You see, Jesus tells us it's the meek that'll inherit the earth. And meek doesn't mean weak. It doesn't mean you're, to be stepped on. It means power under control. And as parents, we yield tremendous power in our children's lives. Let us go with the right words. Peacefulness, that's the first pillar. The second pillar is gentleness. The Greek word that James uses for gentleness is to be considerate, right? It's epiekos. And it suggests an attitude of gentleness and moderation in relationships. It's what we call emotional sobriety. It's understanding and cultivating inner stability. This gentleness about choosing mercy over strict judgment, choosing mercy over kindness, choosing kindness over harshness, and choosing patience over impatience. And I've been told I can be abrupt. I don't believe that's true, but but you could ask my wife. Actually, my counselor told me years ago, you can be abrupt. And I said, yeah, you can be stupid. But I never brought that up. But my wife will say, you're being abrupt. I hate that counselor if she ever said that. But Solomon says a gentle answer turns away wrath. But a harsh word stirs up anger. Man, I'm quick with harsh words sometimes. I'm really good at it. I mean, I'm surprised that sarcasm is not a spiritual gift. I'm so good at it. But we diffuse all types of confrontations if we use the right wisdom in the words that we speak. See, Solomon says, Proverbs 25:15, through patience a ruler can be persuaded, and a gentle tongue can break a bone. Something as tough and unforgiving as a bone can be moved by gentle patient persuasion. This gentleness is so valuable in conflict resolution. Gentle words turn away wrath. In influence, a gentle spirit can influence and persuade others even in challenging situations. In relationship building and in personal growth. Gentleness is the second pillar. The third pillar is submissiveness. The willing to yield. We need to be submissive to wisdom. Humility and submissiveness to wisdom are essential for a successful life. Proverbs 1:3 says, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. We need to be submissive to parental authority, right? I know that's tough. Look, I grew up in a house, my dad was out of control. And when I became a Christian and I was told, you must honor your parents, I was like, man, some parents just aren't honorable. But the fact of the matter, what God is telling us, listen, that is your father, that out of all eternity, he may not have chosen you, but I chose him to be your father. I want you to honor that fact. I know that he does things that are dishonorable, but I want you to honor the fact that he is your father. Submit to the fact that they are our biological parents and God chose them. We're submissive to God's will. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him and he will make your path straight. Listen, there's no give and take with God's desire for us to obey him. To obey is better than sacrifice. I don't care about all your shirt that says Jesus or your belt buckle, your hat. I told you to obey. That's why Uzzah was struck dead. God requires us to obey immediately. Jesus says, hey, come on. They say, what are you doing? Where are you going? Hey, come on, follow me. All right, let me bury my father. No, let the dead bury the dead. You follow me. He asks us to obey even when it doesn't make sense. You ever have that struggle with God? That doesn't make any sense, Lord. Obey when you don't see the personal benefit. That's not working for me, God. And obey to completion. Jesus obeyed to completion. He didn't get all the way to Golgotha and say, okay, somebody else take the cross. I'm done. I carried it. I was beaten. I was whipped. He went all the way to completion. We need to show submissiveness to discipline and correction. Solomon says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. Submissiveness to correction is a sign of wisdom and self-respect. We submit to authority. We submit to correction. We submit in relationships. Paul says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others, submitting to that, others before me. How often do I neglect this? Because you know what? We go into relationships, hey, what's in it for me? Valuing others above our own interests and ambitions. I actually did this with my father. I did do this with my father. I was sharing with somebody the other day that when my father was sick, I took care of him, and I would go over his house. I'd bring him breakfast, and I'd bring him dinner every day, and I ran his errands, and I was taking care of everything. My sister was in California. My brothers had passed away, and I was the only one to take care of him, and he was difficult. He was abusive every day, and I'd be like, you understand who's feeding you? Nobody else is coming to feed you, Dad. And there was one night where God had impressed upon me, you need to go over there and share the gospel with your dad. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I don't care, God. I don't care if he goes to hell. You know what? I think he should go to hell. And I'm not doing it. And I went for a long walk, and I argued with God. That always works out great. When you argue with God, let me tell you, that's perfect. And I just was like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not sharing it with him. You figure out another way. And God said to my heart, are you kidding me? You're not going to do that, Terence? What if that woman on the bus in California didn't sit down next to you? And I drove to his house that night, and I put my head on my steering wheel, and I said, this is lopsided, God. For all that I've gone through, that I got to bring this to him. And God said, you know what? It is lopsided. And it's kind of like our relationship, lopsided. So when you argue with God, he's always smarter. And you know what? I did get to share the gospel with my dad, and he did accept it. The next thing is merciful. You know, Jesus said, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. In Matthew chapter 9, he says, listen, for all you can learn, for all you can study, everything you want to hear, go and learn this. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Mercy and compassion are more important than outward religious practices. It's about doing something to help, forgive, or care for someone who needs it. Jesus so closely identifies to us showing mercy that he says, truly I say to you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. When you go to the missions, the missions with Butch, you're doing it for him. When you go to prison with Saints Prison Ministry, you're doing it with him. When you come to the care team and you deliver a meal, you're doing it for him. When you go with Lost and Found, you're doing it for him because he so closely identifies with those who are broken. Helping the poor, visiting the sick, serving those in need, that's mercy in action. That is a pillar of wisdom. The fifth pillar is fruitfulness. It's an essential attribute to one who's growing in Christ. It refers to growing, producing good works and godly character and spiritual growth for the glory of God and his kingdom and all of those around us. In John chapter 15, Jesus says, remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from you, you can do nothing. What is the fruit in your life? I mean, come on, man, what's the fruit in your life? We can't just show up, oh, well, I didn't grow anything, and nothing grew around me. Again, another dad story. There's so many of them. He was such a character. So my dad bought 4 trees for our backyard. There were 4 kids, so he bought each one of us a tree, and he planted the trees. Now, he was under the impression that he bought 4 cherry trees. One of them grew pears, so they weren't all cherry trees, right? You couldn't convince him of that. He would say, I bought 4 cherry trees. And my mother would say, Andy, that tree is growing pears just to spite you. You can say anything you want. You can wear any label you want. It's based on the fruit you produce. It wasn't a cherry tree. It was a pear tree. Your roots are firmly planted in the reverence and awe of God. The fruit will be good. Solomon says in Proverbs 21:5, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. I love the attributes of a diligent man. They plan, they focus, and they persevere. And diligence leads to fruitfulness. The fruitfulness for a Christian is, are you abiding in Christ? Are you exhibiting the fruit of the Spirit? Are you doing good works? Are you living righteously? Are you sharing the gospel? Are you leaving an eternal impact? True fruitfulness is both a gift, but it's a responsibility as well. The awe of God ensures that we're nurtured and multiplied and shared to help others. The sixth pillar is impartiality, right? Solomon says in Proverbs 24, these are the sayings of the wise. To show partiality in judging is not good. And look what James says. James 2, verse 9, it says, but if you show favoritism, you sin and are convicted by the law as lawbreakers. Favoring one person over another is seen as sin. For many years, I coached my sons in hockey. I coached 3 of my sons. And I had to work very hard not to show partiality to my sons because I wanted to. Because you know what? My sons, whatever team they were on, they were really the best players on the team. That's not partiality. That's fact. They were good. I understood their skill level, and I knew that I could trust them in times of crisis. Now, my son Josh, I got to see him coached by another man. And so it's interesting. I want to see how this guy coaches Josh. Now, Josh, when he was playing on this tournament team, he was not the best player. These guys were really good. But in times, critical times during the game, or when game got out of hand, the coach always put Josh in. And I asked him, I noticed that, things got a little physical, things got out of hand, you put Josh in. And he said to me, I could trust Josh not to lose his cool, and I know that he would do what I told him to do. He was not partial to his son, who was one of the best players but he knew my son would be out there. Partiality is a pillar of wisdom. It demonstrates justice and equality. And the seventh pillar is sincerity. It involves being gentle, truthful, and authentic, right? The essence of integrity. You ever meet these people? This guy's sincere. You would also say this guy's sincerely an idiot, but this guy's sincere. This guy has integrity. This guy has character, man. This guy's a mensch. Their actions are aligned with their inner values, the true north. Authenticity leads to stability and peace. Sincerity is a pillar of wisdom because it ensures that our thoughts, our actions, and our words align with God's truth and are consistent with his righteousness. Solomon describes sincerity in Proverbs 10:9. He says, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. We need to show sincerity in our relationship with God. In Psalm 51:6, it says, surely you desire the truth in the inner parts. You teach me wisdom in the innermost parts. And we need to show sincerity in our relationship with others. Proverbs 16:13, it says, kings take pleasure in honest lips. They value the one who speaks what is right. You can sniff out a phony, can't you? Well, not everybody wants to hear what's right. There's a section in the Bible where one of the kings is asking for a prophet, and they say, we got, Jackson here. He's a prophet. He says, don't bring that guy. He never says anything I like. We hunt around for people who say the things we like. But sincerity, you want to hear what's right. You can be sincere, or you can be sincerely wrong. There are people that say, well, yeah, but how come they don't believe in Jesus, but they're sincere? They're sincerely wrong. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Are you a sincere person? When you meet with people, they say, hey, this is a guy of integrity. This is a woman of character. And so in summing up the 7 pillars, number 1 is peace-loving. Where do you find your peace? And where do you bring your peace? Number 2 is gentleness. Do you choose kindness over harshness? I don't always. Do you choose patience over impatience? Are you a gentle soul? Anybody here Watchman Nee? Watchman Nee, I've read his books, I guess, last 40 years. When I read his books, this guy was a gentle soul. I would have loved to have met him. 3rd is submissive. Are you willing to yield to God's obedience and be obedient to God? Are you willing to yield to that? Merciful. Are you helping the poor? Are you visiting the sick? Are you serving those in need? That's mercy in action. Are you fruitful? Diligence leads to fruitfulness. Are we diligent in all we do? Are we impartial? Or do we demonstrate justice, equality, and fairness? And lastly, are we sincere? Are we genuine? Are we truthful? Are we authentic? Do people feel comfortable with us? This is a man of character. Are we sincere in our thoughts, our words, and our actions? There are going to be members of the care team up here when we finish if you want to pray. If there's something you want to pray about, or if you want to talk to somebody. We'll be in the front and we'll be in the back. Look for the lanyards and just say, hey man, there's something I need to pray. But I like to close with this prayer with Ephesians 3. I just think this is a beautiful prayer that Paul gives to the Ephesians. And so if you bow your head, I'd like to put God's name on you. I pray that God would grant you, according to the riches of his glories, to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in the inner self, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, and that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to all the fullness of God, that you may be filled to all the fullness of God. Amen.